Hello and welcome to Sci-Fi Christian. I'm Ben DeBono. Slightly different setup here for the video today because I want to have our website over at the Sci-Fi Christian open to kind of walk you through what we're going to be doing. So this is the introductory video for the reading, read-along, whatever you want to call it, of the Divine Comedy that I'm going to be doing for the Sci-Fi Christian throughout the Lenten and Easter seasons. So we're going to kind of walk through that today, talk about what the schedule is, talk about, how to read Dante, what are some good resources for that, especially if this is your first time going through the Divine Comedy. It can be a daunting read, but it's a read that is worth doing and one that you are more than capable of doing if you're well prepared and equipped to take on the text. And it is one that is well worth it. And I think, especially for those of us who are religious, reading this during the Lenten and Easter seasons can add a great deal to our own experience of what God might have for us during those liturgical times of the year. A couple of things I want to start out with just by way of clarification on this, to maybe talk about what this is not. What this is not is not the Dante version of what I did with Paradise Lost last summer and fall, where we went through Paradise Lost book by book and tried to look at it analytically. Those of you who have watched enough of these videos know that I am an analytical person, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend like none of that's going to come out through this. But I'm primarily doing this as a gateway into a devotional mindset for Lent and Easter. So this is going to have, in my mind, ideally, a less academic feel and more of a faith engagement feel. Now, before those of you who maybe aren't interested or in doing a Lenten and Easter reading, or maybe not religious, or you're from a faith tradition that doesn't do Lent, or Easter's one day instead of the 7 weeks that it is for Catholics and more liturgical Christians, before you turn off, if you're in that case, let me just encourage you to stick around for this reason. Dante's worth reading, and I think that it's important to read Dante academically, of course, but I think that if you're really going to get all that there is to get out of Dante, you need to read it from a religious perspective at one time or another. So what I would offer to those of you who, especially if you're not religious and you're still interested in following along, maybe the devotional stuff doesn't apply to you personally, but what you'll be able to see is maybe a different perspective on the Divine Comedy, more of a insider's perspective, if you will. Dante was a religious individual, obviously. He's writing this with very religious motives in mind. The Divine Comedy has been referred to as the Summa in verse, referring to Thomas Aquinas' great Summa Theologica. So, if we only read from an academic perspective, I would argue that we are missing something there as well, because it needs to be read from a religious perspective in addition to an academic perspective. And so, this is your chance, if you are not interested in doing devotional readings, for whatever reason that might be, and that's perfectly fine, to get a unique and different perspective on Dante. So, I would encourage you to stick around if for only that reason. And then for those of us who are religious or have some religious motivation and wanting to read the text, I think there'll be just that much more for us to experience and allow Dante to guide us through the Lenten and Easter seasons. Okay, let's talk about the Divine Comedy itself, and maybe we'll do this as I scroll down to our reading schedule here. By the way, so this link to what I'm looking at here is in the video description. What you're going to see here is an introduction. The video I'm recording now will be posted here once I upload it, so you won't have to check back soon unless you're looking at this right away, because the video should be up there shortly, just as soon as I finish editing and uploading this later today. And then we have a reading schedule, and then at the bottom here, I have some recommended resources. So we'll talk through all of this. Now, here's the thing about the Divine Comedy. If you've read anything, you've probably read parts of Inferno. And I think that what happens is a lot of people get through Inferno, they struggle through the early parts of Purgatory, and then they give up. Why? Because Inferno seems like the cool part of the book. It seems like that's where all the action is, right? I mean, that's where all the violent, disgusting horror movie, worse than anything you've ever seen in a horror movie, descriptions are. But I think that that's a mistake. People who fall into that trap are fundamentally reading Dante in a way that Dante never intended and that the text doesn't lend itself to. This is not an action adventure. This is not a rollop through the afterlife. This is not a chance to see all the cool stuff that heaven and hell and anywhere in between might have to show for us. What the Divine Comedy is it is a contemplation. It's an opportunity to contemplate our fallen state as humans and what it means to be redeemed. And as we move through the Divine Comedy, what you will find is that we do get away from the graphic stuff because it moves from the graphic, from the disgusting, from the evil, into a higher and higher state of contemplation, to the point where when we get to the beatific vision at the end of Paradiso, it's almost as though Dante can't even describe what is going on in this story because the visuals are so beyond what we can possibly experience as humans. When we're in Inferno, that is what we do experience as humans. We are seeing the outward working of our sin. There is no problem describing that. But when it comes to what it means to take our place among the great saints and ultimately before the Blessed Virgin and the Holy Trinity itself, that's something words can't truly grasp. And Dante realizes that, and so things do become further and further removed from the visceral as we're invited into an increasing level of meditation. And so recognizing that that's the journey, that it's not to show you a bunch of cool stuff, is really important. In fact, I think Dante would be horrified at us reading the Inferno for the cool stuff. It is gross. It is graphic. You hear all about how Christian entertainment should be family friendly. The Inferno is anything but. It's meant to take your face and shove you into the disgusting and graphic nature of your sin. It's meant to make you deal with that. And so it's graphic. You should want to look away, and you absolutely should not look away. You should not enjoy the Inferno, at least on that level. It should revolt you because it's telling you about different things in yourself. And at some level, I think we can all identify with just about every circle of Dante's Inferno. And then as we move into Purgatorio, it's almost like Purgatorio is the bath after going through this hellhole. It's the cleansing of the sins as we ascend higher and higher to the divine state. And then as we move into Paradiso, it's the contemplation of what it means to be redeemed and blessed. So I spend a little bit of time there at the beginning because I think that proper expectations are really important to getting out of the Inferno what there is to get out of it. It's not an action story. It's not an adventure story. It's not even really a story on some level, though of course there are characters and plot and all of that. It is a contemplation of sin and redemption. And it is a deeply personal work, if you'll allow it to be. So, go into it with proper motivations. All right. let's talk about the reading schedule. So, like I said, we are going to be reading through Lent, and which begins on Ash Wednesday, about 10 days from now, on the 18th of February, and that will go through Good Friday on April 3rd. So we'll read from the beginning of Inferno to Canto 27 of Purgatorio. There are 33 cantos in Purgatorio and Paradiso. There are 34 in Inferno for a total of 100 altogether. So we'll get to nearly the end of Purgatorio, and I'll explain the division. And then from there, from Easter Sunday, or excuse me, a week from Easter Sunday will be the 5th. So a week from there, we'll come back on Sundays then. So these readings, those videos will be posted on Fridays. Friday's the day of penance in liturgical traditions. But then Sunday's the day of rejoicing. So I'm doing that very intentionally as a tonal shift. There should be a tonal shift in the liturgy, and there should be a tonal shift in how we experience it. So Fridays is when the videos will be posted for the Lenten section, and then as we get into Easter, those will be posted on Sundays, and we'll take it from Easter all the way through Pentecost. Shorter amounts in the second half, but also more to contemplate, more to really think about. Okay. So, Inferno. By next Wednesday, I'll post the first video and just those first two cantos, okay? Canto 1 and 2 are really kind of an introduction. Dante meets his guide Virgil of the Aeneid, the great Roman poet, who is going to guide him through the Inferno and most of Purgatorio as he makes his way through hell and the afterlife in search of his lost love Beatrice. Okay, so in Inferno, let's talk about the famous circles here as we move through. You'll notice that Dante actually moves through the first half of Inferno very, very quickly, and then things slow down in the first way. So, the first circle, I made a mistake here. That should have been Limbo is actually circle 1, so I need to correct that, so I'll have this corrected by the time the video is up. But so for that first week, we're actually going to make it all the way through circle 6, where we'll see Limbo. Limbo is in Dante's world those who are in hell technically, but it's only because they never heard the gospel. People like Homer are there, people who are good. Limbo's actually seems like a fairly pleasant place when he describes it. It's just not, it's nowhere near as horrifying as what's to come, but yet because they never understood the gospel, they are denied entrance into heaven. And then we make our way down with the lustful, the gluttons, the hoarders and wasters, the wrathful and sullen, the heretics. And then circle 7 is where we start to have the circles be divided. So, in our second full week of reading, we will make it through circle 7. Round 1, the violent against others, and the violent against self, and the violent against God. And circle 8 is then divided into 10 bulgia or pits, or however different study guides will label them differently. Bulgia 1 and 2 have the seducers and panderers and the flatterers. The theme of circle 7 is obviously violence. The theme of circle 8 is fraud. The simoniacs, magicians from Simon Magus in the book of Acts, they are named. Fortune tellers and diviners. The grafters are corrupt politicians, hypocrites, thieves, evil counselors, the sowers of discord, and the falsifiers. And then we get to circle 9, the treacherous. Treacherous to kin, to country, to guests and hosts. For those of you who are Game of Thrones fans, that would be where House Frey will someday be residing. And then finally, the treacherous to lords and benefactors. Most of all, the treacherous to God. And there we get maybe the most memorable image of the Inferno, where Brutus and Cassius, the betrayers of Julius Caesar, and Judas Iscariot himself are being chewed alive by the 3 heads of Satan, who is trapped from the waist down in a pit of ice. And as they are chewed alive, their flesh is eternally regrown so that they never cease to experience torment. It's horrifying. All right, and then we move on to Purgatorio. So we'll finish that up. 3 weeks to kind of get through Inferno. So that comes out to about 10 cantos a week. A little more than one a day. That should be pretty doable. It's not a ton of reading. If you fall behind, don't stress it. Don't stress it. There's lots of tools to help you get caught up and everything. But I would encourage you to maybe, just plan out reading 1 or 2 cantos a day. If you read 2 a day, you would be well caught up. That's not a lot of time reading. Maybe 10, 15 minutes, depending on how carefully you want to do it. Maybe more or less for some people. But if you read 2 cantos a day, then you'll usually have at least 1 to 2 catch-up days per week or days off. And so that's, a good way to kind of keep yourself on pace. All right. And then Purgatorio. So first, we kind of have the escape from hell, and then outside Purgatorio, and then there's this Purgatorio, Valley of Rulers, and then there's 7 terraces in Purgatory. And it's pretty easy to see that they make up these 7 deadly sins. Now, Purgatory is different in Dante's world than either the Inferno or Paradise, both of which are permanent locations. That's why you see, the heretics permanently reside in Circle 6. The thieves are permanently in Circle 8. And then on the other hand, we'll see, the just rulers are permanently on Jupiter, and the wise are permanently residing on the sun. Obviously not scientifically accurate, or they'd be being burned up, but never mind that. But in Purgatory, there's no permanence here. You're moving through these. Purgatory for Dante is a great mountain, which the blessed, or soon-to-be blessed, are climbing. So anybody in Purgatory, and this is true Catholic theology, they are all saved, they're all guaranteed salvation, but it's a cleansing period. So there's no permanence to those who reside on the different terraces of Purgatory. They are moving up through pride, envy, wrath, sloth, avarice, gluttony, and lust. All right. Then we hit Easter. And the reason we stop there is because the last, that's from Canto 28 to 33. So whatever that is, the last 5, 6 cantos of Purgatory actually take place in the terrestrial paradise. And that's where we're done with sin at that point. Virgil hands Dante off to Beatrice. He meets her in the terrestrial paradise. It's kind of presented as Eden, or at least very Edenic. And that is, he's not in paradise yet, but he's outside of hell and inferno. So from that point, we've dealt with sin, and we move into blessedness, which is what the Easter season ought to be about. So Paradiso is made up of several spheres. This is not a heliocentric universe. This is a Ptolemaic view of the solar system. And as we ascend each one of these, we draw closer and closer to the beatific vision, to the Holy Trinity itself. So, the moon, the lowest level, the inconstant, those who are blessed, but at times forsook their vows, that didn't follow God as closely as they ought to have. The ambitious, those who did good, but maybe out of selfish motivations. They're on Mercury. And then Venus, the lovers, those who loved in a holy way. The wise, the sun, the people like Thomas Aquinas, the great teachers of the faith. Mars, the warriors of the faith, those who defended Christendom and Christianity, both in a physical sense and in a spiritual sense. The just rulers on Jupiter, the contemplatives on Saturn, and then we get to the fixed stars where we contemplate the virtues of faith, hope, and love. Then we move on to the angelic orders, where, of course, we meet the great angels. And then the beatific vision, that's where the greatest of the saints are. People like Adam is there, Eve is there, and Abraham and Moses, and of course the Blessed Virgin Mary, and then at the center of the Empyrean is the beatific vision where Dante sees the Holy Trinity, and Beatrice is transformed in front of his very eyes into a vision of unspeakable beauty in the light of the Trinity. And we close on what I find to be one of the most moving and absolutely chilling passages of literature as Dante contemplates what awaits him in the beatific vision. All right, finally, some recommended resources for you. First, I'm going to be reading from the John Ciardi translation. This is, I believe it was published in the 70s, very readable, lots of good notes. I recommend that one. It's one I'm going to be quoting from. Of course, though, there's a plethora of different translations out there, so find the one that works for you. But if you've never read Dante before, I do recommend that one as a starter. And then Dante Worlds is another book, and if you click on that link there, it'll take you right to Amazon for both of these. And you'll be able to see, it's a kind of a beginner's guide where it will guide you through what's going on in the Divine Comedy, fill you in on some of the various characters. There's some people that are pretty obscure to us that Dante encounters along the way. Use it either as a direct companion where you read the section in Dante Worlds directly parallel with the section we're reading in the Divine Comedy, or you can use it as a reference book. It works well either way, but I would highly recommend downloading that to your Kindle or iPad, or picking up a copy or something. It's well worth it, especially if this is your first time going through the Divine Comedy. There's a lot of great artwork out there. In fact, let me just click on this link so we can go back there. So, this takes you to a site called The World of Dante, and if you click on some of these, it'll take you into different galleries, artwork, and there's even some sculptures there, and great drawings, and paintings, and everything. There's a nice timeline here. There's different resources. So I signaled this out as artwork, but really I encourage you to kind of explore this entire site, and there's a ton of other good resources online. I really only listed a couple. And then finally, different student guides. And don't turn your nose up at these. These are so helpful when you're reading difficult literature. So don't feel like, I'm out of college or high school or whatever, I'm not going to go to Cliff Notes. Do, because they're really helpful. They have good analysis to get you thinking, and if you get lost along the way in the plot, which probably is going to happen, it's a difficult work in places, these are going to get you unlost. So Shmoop is great. It has all three, and then for just the Inferno, Spark Notes and Cliff Notes have those as well. Those are free, which you can't ask for better than that. So those will help you out along the way. All right, everyone. So that's it for the introduction. I'm going to be back on Ash Wednesday, where we'll discuss the opening section of the Inferno. I hope you will read along with us, and I hope it will help you have a wonderful Lent and Easter season. It's going to be a fantastic journey. But for now, I'm Benny Bono, and this is the Sci-Fi Christian.